30 years ago, a calling met obedience, and what began as a step of faith became a legacy of faithfulness. This is not the end of a journey, it is the evidence of one. 30 years built on faith, service, and love for God's people. Please enjoy this in-depth conversation with Pastor and First Lady Wormley.
Hold on to God's unchanging hand. The words to that song has sustained me down through the years and is sustaining me, and I'm sure it will sustain me for the rest of my days.
I would say for me it's Amazing Grace. I think about that song because at some point I was in a situation where I had to learn what that's the author and the writer and what his life actually meant to him. His name was John Newton, and he was a slave master. And even with his lifestyle, God saved him, and he thought that was amazing that even with what he had, the kind of life he had lived, that he was able to be saved. And so that song does it for me, Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound.
Oh, I remember so vividly on Sunday mornings how the choir would gather and meet in the vestibule, and then at the appropriate time they would march down that aisle singing to the glory of God. That just did it. The men, the senior choir, and then the youth choir. I remember Reverend Scott used to have them lined up on the right-hand side of the church, and at such time they would start down the wall and come on up singing up into the choir loft.
I think one of the fond memories that I have is the breakfasts, the men in the basement cooking the breakfast and messing the eggs up sometimes.
Right.
But that was a fun time because it was a time of such fellowship because Mount Zion at the time was full of men. I mean, it was a great group of men, and so that was one of the things that that brings back real fond memory was the breakfasts and the men cooking breakfast for the congregation. We were actually living in Fredericksburg at the time, and Bert was our babysitter. And so we would come, and actually our kids stayed out here because both of us were working. And so we would come out here on the weekends, to pick the kids up, or Friday nights to pick the kids up, and things of that nature. And then we started to come to church a little bit. And but Bert had always been the one in the family that kind of was the godly type, and we kind of looked to her for things, of the godly nature. She was kind of holding stuff together on both ends, kind of speak. And so because of her, we started to come to church, and then as a result of her, we joined church, and we joined church out here, and I guess the rest is kind of history.
Yes. Bert was like the glue that held the family together. Not only being our babysitter, she was such an inspiration, such an example of a Christian woman. And she and I became more like sisters rather than sister-in-laws. And we started to come to Mount Zion, and of course we brought the children. And by coming and sitting under Reverend Scott's teaching and hearing the word, one day it pricked our hearts, and we joined the church. And like Pastor says, the rest is history.
We actually went through the whole gamut. I was I was a Sunday school teacher. I was a deacon. And then we were ordained a deacon, and then we were licensed as a minister. And I remember at a church meeting, we had I made a recommendation for 3 ladies to become deaconess, and they were Pat and Bert and Barbara Pendleton. They were the three ladies that I recommended to be deaconess, and then so it was those kinds of things that that we, in other words, we were really involved in the ministry of the church when we were fairly young, and we just kind of grew, and the church grew in us, and we grew in the church. So that's kind of how we ended up, being in the capacity that we finally ended up in after leaving for 16 years and going to another church in Madison County. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And certainly being instrumental in the music ministry and the missionary society, the women's fellowship, like Pastor said, the whole gamut, church, school, Bible study. That's where we got our start.
Yeah. When we joined Mount Zion was a two Sunday church, second and fourth Sunday, and at some point in time, of course, Reverend Scott took us to 4 Sundays, and when we became a licensed minister, and then at some point we were ordained. I think about 4 years, 3 or 4 years later, we were ordained. And one of the ministers that was pastoring 2 churches, he was pastoring at Wilderness. What's the name of the church?
Pilgrim
Wilderness, and Chestnut Grove. And he called me one night and asked me to do a one-night revival, youth revival. He said, I want you to do a one-night. It was a 2-night revival, but he wanted me to do one night and Charles Hilliard to do one night. And so we went to do our one night, and then he called me and said, Hilliard forgot. and so he asked me would I come back the second night, and of course I said yes. And that's how I got introduced to Chestnut Grove. And lo and behold, he got called to his home church as a result of something that had gone on with him. And he said, I'm going to recommend you for Chestnut Grove. So that was the long and short story of how we ended up at Chestnut Grove doing a 2-night youth revival.
Yes, and of course the transition at first was hard, leaving the church family here at Mount Zion and going to Chestnut Grove. Of course, it took us 40 or 45 minutes to get there, so that was the trek every Sunday morning to be there for church school and church service. But we got to know the people, the families, and God just settled us in, and we enjoyed being there for the 16 years that we were there.
And we did take a couple of Mount Zion members too.
Yes.
Cora started to go with us, and Cora took Missy, and so Missy and CJ, they were in the back, and they tell stories now about going to Chestnut Grove, and they reminisce about those days. Yeah. Well, as Pat was saying about the youth choir, so Cheryl and Chantay and Debbie sang in the youth choir, and we always they would, when they would rehearse, sometimes they would rehearse at Aunt Bert's house and things of that nature. And so sometimes I would always like sing with them, and for some reason the 4 of us, I don't know, our voices
just meshed.
they just and we say, oh, this sounds good, so that's how it kind of, so we started to going around doing a little singing and things of that nature, and so we started to call ourselves the Faith Singers, because we didn't have a pianist, and so we would go out and we would take engagements, hoping that somebody would be there and just pick us up, and so that was the faith that so we went out on that, and we were together for a long time. But we didn't mind singing a cappella because that's how we started. We started singing a cappella, and so it didn't matter whether we had music or not, because we just loved singing that much, and for some reason our voices just
blended.
It was if I have to say so myself, it was a real good sound.
Yes.
There was a breakup with Mount Zion and Reverend Scott, and a couple of members came up to visit me. Richard Outlaw was one of them, and they talked to me at Chestnut and wanted to know if I would be interested in pastoring my home church. And that was a thing going around where you don't do that. You just don't, even as the scripture that said, a prophet is accepted everywhere but at home. And so we had some consternation about coming back. But there was a drawing also because Long Branch really was my home church that I had grown up in, and so we got an invitation to come, and so we accepted the invitation, and we came back.
And when he was asked, or after he was asked, he discussed it with me. And before he discussed it with me, the Spirit had already shown me in a vision him standing in Mount Zion preaching. And I never told him that until after he got the call asking him if he wanted his name put on the list of pastors being looked at to become pastor of Mount Zion.
Well, when Reverend Scott came here, one of the things that Mount Zion did that was always, I thought, unique to me, because I had been to a lot of Baptist churches and I had never seen it quite like it happened at Mount Zion. But all of the men were called uncle. All of the women were called aunt.
Yes.
And it didn't mean that you were necessarily kin. Now, there was a lot of kin,
yes,
but there was a lot of it that was not blood kin. But it was such a relationship until it just felt natural. It felt normal. It felt real. And I think it became real for us. And I'm talking about the people that were in Mount Zion. And so I think that the transition from family member to pastor, or from pastor to family member, wasn't a terrible transition, because it was more or less dealing with family, and it made it a lot easier for me. It was like brothers and sisters, and brothers and sisters go through things all the time. And so it seemed to have helped us at Mount Zion to transition and to go through things and to be about things, because we considered ourselves family rather than pastor and people or things of that nature. So I think that was one of the things that helped us to navigate through things. And another thing that we never wanted to be a part of was an argumentative type of situation or circumstance. we're not an arguing type person, and so we wouldn't participate in so if it started to get out of hand, we went to something else, or we shut it down or something of that nature. So it was always hopefully being a leader that led through calmness, or through meekness, or through humility, rather than the rationality as far as I was concerned, was we don't need to fight about it. If we got to fight about it, it's not worth it to me.
In situations, if they arose, we would just pray and ask God to not let it be a disruption in carrying out the ministry of the church.
We want to also remind us as members of Mount Zion that we will be having a mortgage burning today, immediately following the morning service. So we're going to meet in the parking lot immediately following the morning service. We will meet each other in the parking lot. We will have a brief ceremony, and then we will go through with.
I remember we were out front, and we came out after service, and everybody was gathered around, and they had the finished, paid off mortgage papers in a container, and I just remember them lighting it and burning it, and everybody praising and clapping and thanking God that this had transpired.
It was a high time in the Lord, because it was something that had never transpired or had never taken place. I guess whenever Mount Zion had done anything, they had just kind of done it. But to have a mortgage burning, was like new to them, and so there was like a history making type of situation that we went through that day. So it was a highlight of Mount Zion. Yeah. I can think of wonderful homegoing services that we've had here, because we've had to utilize some wonderful people, and who were so instrumental in our ministries and in our lives.
Yes, and thinking of Vivian Brooks, it brings back such vivid memories, especially with the ushers, and she grabbed, it seems like, every person that came through the door and solicited them to join the usher board. Right. I remember the young girls, our daughter Patrina and Lynn, Deetra and Deetris, all of them.